Alright, yesterday was all positivity, it was all good stuff, it was all let's talk about how fantastic the Vancouver Canucks are, or at least two players on the Canucks, Miller and Pettersson. But hey, in this video, we're snapping back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity, as we talk about some of the trade rumors that have been discussed when it comes to the players we discussed yesterday. Okay, player, not players, because Pettersson is not in any trade rumors, at least that I'm aware of, which is a pretty good thing. Instead, we're focusing on JT Miller because this was another angle that had been highlighted by Elliotte Friedman on the Jeff Marek Show that we had not talked about on the channel just yet. So, our scoop comes, as we said, from the Jeff Marek Show on the radio. This is what Friedman had to say about JT Miller and another potential team that could potentially be involved. The LA Kings. They were in on Tyler Toffoli. I feel bad. Almost every day I do this. They're another team I wonder if they have talked to Vancouver about what Vancouver has got there. They're looking for a score. Now, before we read the next part, I will say this. When it comes to the Tyler Toffoli trade from Montreal to Calgary, correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually did have some word that LA was involved in those talks before the trade was actually finalized. Like, before Montreal pulled the trigger with Calgary, we did hear pretty extended word that LA was trying to get Toffoli back. I was debating as to whether or not we would actually make a video about that, but I don't think that came to fruition. We came up with a whole bunch of Tyler Toffoli and the Flames videos, and then the actual one was, oh, he got traded. Wow, all the rumors were true. But Elliotte on the Kings talking about how they're also still looking for a scorer, and JT Miller may be that type of guy, does have me intrigued. Now, Elliotte did add that Blake prefers not to give up more than he did for Victor Arvidsson. Obviously, that wouldn't be enough for JT Miller. Arvidsson was traded, if you remember this from a year ago, to LA in exchange for a second and third. That's it. 2 draft picks for Victor Arvidsson, and to be fair, he actually is doing pretty well, so, I mean, a third and a second for a guy in the NHL who this season has posted up 34 points in 45 games? Yeah, that's great. Now, I know there was some extenuating circumstances that made Arvidsson worth a lot less than he probably could have gone for because the Nashville Predators were going through a different transition with this type of player, but still. Before we proceed with this any further, I wanted to make one more little quip. If Rob Blake did not want to go out there and spend more than a second and a third for a score, then okay. That is absolutely why you didn't get Toffoli. That is why he went to Calgary instead. Look at the package the Flames gave up to get Tyler Toffoli from Montreal. A first, Emil Heineman, all this stuff. It's a lot. And if Rob Blake's ultimate plan was to try to acquire a scorer, whether that's Tyler Toffoli, whether that's JT Miller or whatever, and try to give up the same or less than what you gave up for Arvidsson, you're not going to go out there and get anybody. A second and a third is not going to cut it on this trade market, especially with Tyler Toffoli setting the market for the rest of these rental forwards. Actually, scratch that, Toffoli's not a rental, he's signed on for a few more years, so even just regular forwards. So already, I'm kind of skeptical about JT Miller and the LA Kings, mostly because Rob Blake seems a little bit unwilling to actually shell out a decent return, and the Vancouver Canucks, we've already talked about this before, especially yesterday. They don't feel like they need to trade Miller. They can hold on to this guy, they can trade him later, they can trade him next year, they can trade him in the offseason, they can do a whole bunch, or they can just re-sign him if they really wanted to do that. So there definitely isn't any desperation to go out there and make a JT Miller trade should you believe that is where the team should go. Now, I get it, a lot of people are starting to jump onto the, okay, I don't really want to trade Miller anymore train because of the 4-point night, because of the fact that he's a top 10-point scorer in the NHL right now. There's a lot of good things going on with Miller, but if we were to explore the idea of a trade, Cam Robinson has our back. He says this: if you want to talk about an organization that has a wealth of high-end prospects to dangle, it's the LA Kings. Right-handed defensemen, Faber and Clarke are serious. Helge Grans ain't bad either. Center with upside, Alex Turcotte remains intriguing. Ditto for Kupari. If you want a sniper, there's Arthur Kaliev as well. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Out of all the teams that we have seen talking about JT Miller, okay, you're talking about the Boston Bruins, you're talking about the Calgary Flames, the Minnesota Wild, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the LA Kings are the ones with the best prospect core by far. You talk about all the guys that they have in their pipeline, and it's kind of scary that this team is like, second in the Pacific right now, and they still have so much star power in the pipeline ready to develop and prosper in the next 5 years. All these guys are probably going to be NHL talents, or in some capacity, they could be NHL talents, and you're talking about a completely different conversation when you discuss JT Miller over to LA versus JT Miller over to Boston or over to Minnesota. Sure, Minnesota has a lot more prospects than Boston does, but the quantity and the quality certainly does not compare to LA. They're arguably one of the best prospect cores in the entire National Hockey League. So, when I think about JT Miller and the trade price potentially being like a first and a top prospect and another roster player, I'm not gonna lie, man, the first name that pops into my mind is Brandt Clarke, and I know a lot of Kings fans have turned their backs on me because I said that sentence. I'm very grateful for the fact that Kings fans have been so receptive and warm and welcoming every time I make a video talking about your team, but this, in my mind, is just how I evaluate JT Miller. He is that gosh darn good. Rob Blake is probably not going to do that. He's probably not going to go out there and trade Brandt Clarke, but if you want to go out there and try to hypothesize, yes, there you go, that's the word I was looking for, hypothesize what a Miller trade could look like should you get this done under Vancouver terms, this is kind of what you're thinking about. I'm thinking a first-round pick, I'm thinking Brandt Clarke, I'm thinking maybe somebody else to fill in the roster spot that Miller leaves behind, because Vancouver needs right defensemen. Like, I'm sorry, Tyler Myers, Tucker Poolman, these guys are not cutting it. Travis Hamonic, they're not cutting it. On the left, we have Quinn Hughes, Jack Rathbone, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Now, OEL is only there by default because his contract is so gosh darn long. Not necessarily he's there because he's the best option of whoever else the Canucks could have on their left side, but for the right side, it's just like Jet Wu, whom we're still waiting to really hit that stride in the Abbey Canucks system. And then the other players, Tucker Poolman, Travis Hamonic, Tyler Myers, like, I'd be lying if I said I was super happy with this decor. And so for right-side defenseman prospects, Brandt Clarke is the guy that's at the top of my list. Obviously, I mean, I would understand why LA Kings fans would not want to see him go, though. Then you talk about Helge Grans and Brock Faber. Faber has been really good. Like, I'm really surprised to see how good Brock Faber has been ever since graduating from the NTDP. He played at the Olympics, man. Like, he was an Olympic athlete. So good for him going out there for Team USA and getting himself an assist. But a super solid defenseman for the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. He's a great skater. He's a guy that I think absolutely does have a pretty good ceiling, even though he doesn't really produce all too much. Helge Grans is a lot more defensive in my viewing, but he certainly is an intriguing right-side defenseman prospect as well. Plus, he's only 19 years old, so there's a lot more development time to go with this guy. Big player, playing well in the AHL so far. There definitely is a lot more to be desired in the next few years, though, so we'll see where their development goes. But I mean, you're talking about right-side defensemen. This is kind of what I'm thinking about the most. I know Cam Robinson went out there and labeled a sniper, Kaliev. Like, there's no way the LA Kings are giving up Kaliev. Actually, I don't know. Maybe Kaliev is in the same value territory as a Brandt Clarke is, wherein they're the same level of untouchable, I guess. But either way, if you're an LA Kings fan, please let me know in the comments, would you actually go out there and make a trade for JT Miller, a top 10 point producer in the NHL right now? He's got another year at $5-point-something million. He's cheap, he's valuable, he works very hard, and he has been the best Vancouver Canucks forward, consistency speaking, in the last few years. Even this season, under Travis Green, he was still producing a ton, and everybody kind of sucked under Travis Green. So is it a Faber? Is it a Clarke? Is it a Helge Grans? Is it any of these snipers like Kaliev, or a center like Turcotte? Let me know in the comments all your thoughts about the JT Miller idea over here. Elliotte Friedman just kind of went out there and dropped this bomb. He said it in the tweet as well. I feel bad almost every day I do this, that he links teams to players from big market fan bases like Vancouver, and he's like, yeah, this team might be talking about him. Who really knows? So if you're an LA Kings fan, let me know in the comments, would you actually want to go out there and make a trade for Miller? Because that is like the prerequisite to this entire conversation. If you don't feel you want to go out there and make this trade, then hey, we're not even having a conversation in the first place. So talk to me in the comments all your thoughts. If you're a Canucks fan, do you still want to trade Miller after everything we have seen in the past few weeks? It's sort of kind of feeling like the Canucks are starting to shy away from the idea of a Miller trade based off of how well he has been performing? Would you rather just wait until the offseason, re-sign this guy to a $7-8 million AAV deal for a few years and keep him as a part of the core? Or would you want to trade him away, get a guy like Brandt, Clarke, get a guy like, I don't know, Arthur Kaliev or something coming back, assuming the LA fan base would actually be okay with giving that up. But then again, it's not really the fan base that decides that, it's the GM, and the GM doesn't really seem too adamant on getting rid of anything that is of significant value. So I get it, this entire conversation is sort of dumb because Rob Blake doesn't want to give up anything more than a second or a third, but still, you can let me know in the comments all your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this British Trolls 99, and bye.